a full investigation. But I'm just shaking my head and I'm asking myself, whatever the circumstances were, okay, whatever happened, how do you keep this a secret for so long?
Well, you would think, first of all, that there had to be somebody, like you don't bury 215 bodies, child or otherwise, on a school ground and nobody notice. I mean, there are caretakers, there's groundkeepers, there's janitors, there's teachers, there's principals, there's all kinds of people involved in the running of a school besides the student body itself.
Well, you would certainly think so.
Never mind that. What about the parents? How do they keep the parents from asking tough questions? Because I know if my little Johnny or, if one of my kids didn't come home from school ever, I'd want to know why. I'd want to know what happened.
And we're not talking about 1 or 2 or 3 parents here.
No, this is the parents of 215 kids.
So we have to be talking, we could be talking as many as 100 families here.
Well, if each child represents just one family, you're talking about, and let's assume 2 parents for each child, whether they're living together or not. Do the math. 215 times 2. You're talking 500 people.
I just cannot fathom crime or no crime. I cannot wrap my mind around how something like this could be kept covered up. I mean, if it turns out that this was some sort of criminal activity, that this is abuse, how long do you have? Like, how many children do you have to kill, or how many children have to die in suspicious circumstances, or how many children have to die from ostensibly? Okay, let's assume that they're dying from some illness. How many children have to die before somebody actually raises the alarm? And if these children, I think the default assumption here, Nick, has to be that there was some sort of malfeasance going on here, some sort of criminal activity, because otherwise, why bury them in some sort of a mass grave?
I don't know. And the question then becomes, what kind of criminal activity could you benefit? Because these were not kids belonging to wealthy families. There was no ransom involved, not that we know of at this point. What possible criminal activity could be thought of as worth the lives of 215 children?
I don't know.
I can't answer that either. It blows my mind when I really hadn't dwelt a lot upon it until you and I started talking about it now, and the longer I think about it, the more obscene and outrageous it becomes. And dare I say, I don't want to make too many nasty comparisons, but this is the kind of thing that went on in Europe in the 1940s.
That's a good question. I mean, certainly in terms of numbers, in a single event, you're quite right, Nick. Look, more than any other event, this cries out for a deep investigation, and it has to be transparent, and it has to be independent, and most importantly, Nick, it has to be non-ideological. Nobody wants to point fingers here, or nobody should be pointing fingers until we find out what exactly happened, because this is not your typical, to the degree that there's such a thing as a typical murder. Whatever happened here is quite anomalous, and the fact that it was able to be covered up for so long, and only just discovered, and I don't know what even the circumstances of these bodies being discovered today was. I should have actually, looked into that a little bit further, but I think that the temptation here will be for knee-jerk reaction, and I think that is absolutely the worst thing that we could do at this stage. We need to have a full, open, transparent, independent, non-ideological, non-political investigation into what happened here. Who were these children? Why were these children? Why did these children die? Why were they buried in a mass grave? Who was accountable? There are so many aspects of this where there has to be some accountability, and then we have to take a few steps back and say, okay, how did this happen, and how do we prevent this from happening again? And I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to take a big risk here, and I'm going to say, okay, I don't. When I say I don't want this politicized, everything has become political now, with race and with ethnicity, and in Canada anyway, with language and all of this stuff. And so there are going to be people out there who are going to want to use this to advance their political or their policy agenda. And I'm saying to them and to Canadians in general, to people who are listening to this broadcast now, this is not a time for knee-jerk reaction. This is a very serious event that happened here, or series of events over a period of time, and we need to get to the bottom of it and understand it, and set aside political and partisan rhetoric for the time being, and let's just get to the bottom of it, and then we could sort things out from there. That's it. That's my rant, I guess.
Well, the next question is, if you follow this in a linear sense, okay, so everybody agrees this must be done independently with as little philosophical impact from a political point of view as possible. What agency is in this country that we could trust to be impartial and simply follow the trail wherever it leads? The RCMP? CSIS? CSIS is not really there. Ballywick. The local, provincial police forces, or a combination thereof. I can't come up with a group that I would say, okay, yes, them.
Well, we used to have trust in not in government officials, but from time to time, the government would appoint a royal commission or a commissioner or somebody to head up and coordinate an investigation or an inquiry into something. And it seems to me that this is the sort of thing that would that kind of thing would be appropriate to do in this circumstances. My concern is that the independent nature, and by the way, a commission of some sort would have access to police records, etc. But a commission could have its own investigative powers, and you could, by order in council, you could even appoint police officers or investigators and give them police powers, proper investigation powers, subpoena powers, the works. Okay, my concern is that you would have to find somebody that the public really trusts to be completely independent and nonpartisan on this, and the key is finding that individual. So it's not an institutional thing. It's not an agency thing. It's the idea is to find somebody who's not going to be easily corrupted, who's not going to be pulled into the zeitgeist of the day, who's going to be able to and that has some gravitas, some sense of authority around them, that when they get the pressure, as they inevitably will, and as something like this happens, to bow to political winds, then they'll be able to resist them, and basically deliver the straight goods. I don't know who that person is. I'm confident that that person is out there. But I have to tell you that the names that come to mind immediately about who a government might turn to head up an investigation like this, a commission like this, just the names that I'm thinking of, I wouldn't trust them. I'm not even going to say who they are, but there are people out there that I simply would not trust. I wouldn't try. Okay, I'm going to name some names. I wouldn't trust Beverly McLaughlin, the former Chief Justice here in Canada. I think that she's too ideologically tainted. I would not trust Louisa Arbour, a former Supreme Court Justice who has built a reputation for herself investigating war crimes internationally. I wouldn't trust her. I think that people like this, I regret to say, I feel that they have their own ideological agendas and they're not willing or even capable of recognizing those proclivities in themselves, and they're not capable of keeping their political and ideological views out of this.
Yeah, that's the part that makes me kind of shiver, too, because I can't think of any organization or individual with enough status that you just simply can trust them and say that that you can trust them. I'm sorry, I'm getting... What? What about my earphone? Oh, Allison's here. Oh, okay. I'm getting signals from across the desk, and I can't figure out what he wants. There we go. All right. No, I don't have anybody that I trust. The only guy that comes to mind that I would trust without a second thought is probably a little too old, and I don't know that enough other people would join me in that, and that is Lou Mackenzie. The man spent, 3 decades serving the country, wearing the uniform, and performed, with a stellar reputation, and he's somebody I would pick, but I'm not the guy doing the picking.
Yeah, no, Lou Mackenzie actually is a name that did not pop into my mind, and now that you've mentioned him, I think that he probably would be well-suited for something like this, and he certainly won't take any guff off of anybody.
Well, that's why, because you know that he is the kind of guy, look, if he'll tell the UN to go to hell, he'll tell anybody else to go to hell.
True enough, that's true enough.
Not being a little blunt and perhaps a little crass, but... I've met the general a couple of times, and believe me, he is a man of character. He's rare, and I don't know of any other flag rank officer that I would give that kind of respect to. But I'll tell you what, outside of him, I don't know where you'd go. There may be somebody in academia that we have never heard of that could fit the bill. But the bottom line is, in a nutshell, there really isn't anybody that we can turn to trust to get to the bottom of this and not let because the toxic, the atmosphere, political atmosphere in this country and the legal atmosphere is so toxic and so poisoned that it's very difficult to find somebody who can rise above that.
Right.
And that's why Lou Mackenzie is about the only guy I can think of that would be able to pull it off.
Well, there may be others, but I would certainly give my vote to General Mackenzie, if of course he's able to do it from a health perspective. I mean, he's not a young man anymore. Anyway,
I think he's pushing 80 now. Yeah,
he must be. So it would be a significant undertaking. In any event, look, we're going to have to go for a break. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to the show live, whether on the internet or the radio, stay tuned. We're going to be back in a few minutes. If you're listening to the broadcast, or the repeat of the broadcast as a podcast, thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode, and part 2 will be posted tomorrow. So you're listening to the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.